Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. And first and foremost, thanks to Dell and Intel for making this possible. I'm Lee Shelford. We've got the next 15 minutes to talk about the Genetec Streamvault appliances. And I'm lucky enough to be joined here today with David Gray, who's our product group manager from the Streamvault team over in Montreal. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Lee. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So we've got the next 15 minutes to really discuss the power of Streamvault and really what the Streamvault hardware brings to the Genetec portfolio. So some of you may be asking, why is a software predominant company like Genetec bringing hardware to the industry? So David, can you help us answer this question? Why are Genetec, who over the last 21 years have been innovating software, why have all of a sudden we started bringing in all of this powerful hardware to the industry?
That's a great question, Lee. And it really started with a small footprint of hardware, and it's evolved over time to play the role it plays in the portfolio because it does address some very key needs for our customers. But before we introduced any hardware, we took a look at the infrastructure requirements, and we noticed that they were changing. There was growing concerns over cybersecurity. We saw a rise of data breaches and backdoor discoveries, which drove customers' fears and brought a lot of friction into the buying process of our software. We also noticed that there was a lot of issues with standardizations across locations. We're a global VMS. We have a lot of global enterprise customers, and they want to get the same exact deployment, whether or not they're deploying in Australia, they're deploying in Singapore, they're deploying in India, or if they're deploying in Canada or the US, for example. And finally, we wanted to reduce infrastructure footprint. We were hearing more and more friction was being introduced to the buying process as we were filling up IT's data center. IT doesn't want to give up their entire data center footprint to security. So we wanted to find ways to reduce footprint. There's a couple ways we do that with the hardware specifically, but also when you go with a unified security platform like Genetec, you're combining all the different access control, video, and intercom roles, the wealth of different products we have available. They can all be combined into the same system instead of having multiple disparate systems, which is an inefficient way to operate.
Yep.
So to address all of those needs, we came up with Streamvault. And as you'll see today, it's much more than just hardware. There's a lot that we're doing to it that really elevates it beyond just a conversation about hardware. It's actually a system that has a lot of software built into it to ease the deployment of Genetec Security Center and reduce friction along the buying cycle. The first thing we do is address cybersecurity. The second core pillar is lowering total cost of ownership. So not just the acquisition cost, but the cost of operating the system over 5 years, and crucially, the cost of upgrading the system at the end of those 5 years to more modern hardware. And then finally, it allows the continuity of business. So we're ensuring that you spend less time worrying about the infrastructure and more time worried about operating the system or operating your business. So the key approaches to cybersecurity we have to secure the deployment is cybersecurity by default. More and more we see our customers come to us and they say, we're a security first, feature set second organization. So before they look at the features we have in our VMS or in our access control platforms, they want to make sure that we are actually a secure platform to use. Once we've passed their cybersecurity tests, then they'll actually test our feature sets. And that's the mindset that we bring to our development of both the software and the hardware. We also have tools built in to keep the system connected and up to date. We used to hear a lot that we're on an air-gapped network, we don't need to worry about cybersecurity. That isn't really the case. I'll get more into that in a minute, but really connected and up to date is much more secure than is disconnected and out of date. And third, we have some tools built in there to maintain constant vigilance. So it's not a reactive approach to cybersecurity, it's a proactive approach. When it comes to deploying a hardened system, we have the cybersecurity by default that I mentioned already, but we also changed 200 settings in the image, and those 200 settings in the image limit exposure and enforce best practices. So we're setting custom GPOs, we're configuring registry keys, we're setting the firewall, we're setting the antivirus, we're setting the net BIOS. We're forcing the selection of a custom password on first login, so there's no default passwords for the box. There's no backdoor, if you will. And then we also verify Windows updates. What's really important here is this 200 settings is what's needed to bring Microsoft to a very secure platform. By default, out of the box, Microsoft needs to work with thousands of different applications. With Streamvault, we know that it needs to work with all of Security Center's applications. Everything else that isn't needed for the smooth operation of a security system, we can harden and turn off. And crucially, you get that standard deployment. So you're not going to run into a scenario where a tech's been in there and he's walked through the cyber hardening manual by himself. And what the result is, one or two of the settings on one box was different from all the other boxes in a deployment. And it can take hours or days of troubleshooting to try and figure out why you're unable to enroll devices or ports are blocked or something like that. So this standard deployment that is at its outset a very, very secure deployment is really a crucial step in cybersecurity.
Okay, so everybody knows, well, hopefully everybody knows exactly how secure Genetec and especially our flagship product Security Center is, all the way from the Genetec update service, GUS, all the way to us not just notifying of potential firmware vulnerabilities and out-of-date firmware or weak passwords or anything like that within the actual product, but also being able to download the latest firmware from one of our technology vendors, like a camera vendor or access control vendor, being able to, at the right click of a button, push out that fixed firmware to all of the devices. All of this really comes into a multi-layered cybersecurity approach, with security built in the code from the ground up to all of these security features within the platform itself. With Streamvault now, that just brings a whole nother layer to this layered approach, right, David?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about defense in depth, right? It's not relying on a single thing to protect your system. We're adding layers of security, and those layers of security go down to the hardware, making sure you have secure supply chains, but then you add in the software, making sure you're using encryption, then making sure you're setting your passwords. One of the other things that we would hear a lot from our customers was Windows updates are very hard to manage. And so we wanted to build a tool in there. And because we sell the system with the Windows license, we can actually use the Genetec update service to push out the Windows patches when they come out. And crucially, before we push those out, we verify them in our lab. So we apply the patches, we run soak tests, we make sure that the patch didn't do anything to break the security system. Once it's verified, then we push it out. So it's adding a peace of mind to the patching of a system, which is really crucial for our customers, and it's really great for reducing friction. There's this misconception that Windows is not secure. It's not that Windows isn't secure, it's just it requires work to make it secure, and we're providing that work with Streamvault to reduce the load on our customers. Another thing that we're putting in there to give you real-time protection is a machine learning endpoint protection, which sort of works to learn the pattern of behavior of the system. So the machine learning algorithm learns the pattern of behaviors of a system for a video archiver, for example. That'll be, okay, I'm connecting to these cameras. I'm connecting to this directory appliance. I've also got some workstations that are playing back video. Those are the patterns of behavior that it should expect. Those are the file types it should expect. And then anything anomalous to that, it'll detect as a potential threat and then scan the code of that application to make sure it is or isn't a threat. And it's very predictive. So it's able to catch viruses in advance because it knows what malicious patterns of behavior are and updates its algorithm over time. So it's another value add that we're baking into the system by default. And the beautiful part of Cylance is right in the name. It's designed to operate on its own in the background without user input. So you don't need to have a user updating the antivirus every month to make sure that it's got the right list of known threats. It doesn't work that way. It works more on a whitelisting principle, secures the system by default, and then allows in non-malicious applications.
So it's a kind of a set and forget kind of scenario, and also doesn't impact the Streamvault performance, David?
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very light on CPU utilization. So it runs in the background without consuming too much. And the performance testing that we'll talk about on a future slide, that number that we guarantee, it is guaranteed with Cylance operating.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about some of that multi-layered security that's built into the Security Center platform. It's all well and good having all of this security, but obviously visualizing the current state of our security, or most importantly, the current state of any vulnerabilities, is one of the most important factors, right? So what we did when we brought in our dashboards in Security Center 5.8, we actually brought in the security score. And this isn't just oriented for Streamvault. This is for anything that could be deemed as a security threat or lower security in any security center system. But this really plays well into the Streamvault portfolio, doesn't it, David?
Yeah, absolutely. So, any of the infrastructure related stuff that is in this scorecard, making sure you have a complex Windows password, making sure you're not using any default passwords or haven't got your firewalls enabled. All of those things are already going to be done by default. So we've implemented everything we can implement for the infrastructure side so that you're already getting a passing score as you go. So that's how we take care of cybersecurity. And obviously this is a high level summary. We can always do a deep dive at any time with any of you that would like to get into more of the weeds on cybersecurity. We have all those details. It's something that we put a lot of effort into. But on top of that, now we'll talk about the second pillar, which is lowering total cost of ownership. So how does Streamvault lower the total cost of ownership for a project? And the number one reason, or the number one thing we can do, is get more performance per dollar out of each system. So fewer systems means more performance per dollar. We can reduce the installation and maintenance costs. We have tools built in for that. And then we also extend the service life, and we reduce the support cost of the system. So every Streamvault is tested to the limit. And what does that mean? So we have performance, which is using we are using off-the-shelf hardware with Streamvault. It is all based on Dell's product line, but we're still able to get 225% the performance of that off-the-shelf hardware. And what does that number actually mean? It's that Dell has a lab. They have several labs around the world, actually, that all have 5,000 Genetec demo licenses where they will test new products with our demo licenses to make sure that the products can sustain the performance that they would expect out of them. And if there's one that they think would be particularly good for the security workload, they'll test that one first. And in their labs, they tested the 740XD when it first came out a few years ago. And in their testing, they were able to get 600 megabits per second, which is actually double the Genetec recommended spec at the time, which is 300 megabits per second. So we certified them at that 600 megabits per second. We, using the exact same bit of hardware, but we put our image on it and we did our optimizations in the Microsoft image, we're able to get 1,350 megabits per second. So that's 225% the recording performance of even what Dell was able to achieve when they thought that they were pushing their system really right to the limits. But Dell's just pushing the hardware to the limits. They turn it over to us. We can optimize the software and the Windows image and push it even further to get that better performance. So it's half the amount of systems required per deployment. And crucially, that performance is guaranteed for projects and models. So if we say that a Streamvault model can do this performance, we are guaranteeing that performance, meaning it removes an enormous amount of risk in the buying process because the infrastructure is the largest single spend in the project. If it's poorly dimensioned, you're going to end up eroding all of your margins, or you're going to be way overpaying on a project just to make up for the added hardware that has to go in. So we guarantee that performance. We assume that risk ourselves. We've actually tested all of these configurations right up to the edge, so we know exactly what they can do. It's science, but we're removing that risk from the project. We're giving you that guarantee.
So this is really testament to the Dell Genetec Intel relationship, our close collaboration between our departments, that we're able to not only take what Dell's already tested within their labs, David, but also take that one step further with obviously the work we do with Intel and our own R&D department. So this really is the power of the Dell Intel Genetec relationship, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Intel is a big part in funding some of those labs and helping get the next generation products available for test. and then those Dell labs work in collaboration with our own labs to really make sure that we're testing the full gamut of the line. So, most of the smaller stuff we'll bring in-house in Montreal and test in our labs here, but the larger storage products, the more complex VxRail deployments, those all get tested either, in Dell's lab in North Carolina or one of their global labs. And that relationship really saves a lot of time and makes sure that all deployments go as smooth as possible. Another way we can save time or lower the total cost of ownership is by fully hardening the system. So we spend, we asked our engineers how long it would take to manually go through all 200 plus settings that we harden in our image. And they estimated it would take around 11 hours. Most integrators don't budget 11 hours to work on each individual system in a deployment. So you're getting a lot more value added in this because we've done this 11 hours. And then on top of that, we have built in the Security Center software so that you're not having to install it on site or in your labs. You don't have to open the box in your labs, install software, repack it, and ship it off to site. You can do most of that either on site or if you do need to pre-provision it, you don't have to install software. You don't have to get the right version of the software installed and then do all the firewalls and all the other hardening policies. So reducing the cost of actually deploying the system is a big part of where we can add value. And then once you've got the system on site, we can streamline the deployment and maintenance. This is using a tool called the Streamvault control panel. So it's got stuff in there that helps you in a wizard motion walk through your security deployment step by step. It's very good if not all of your technicians are Genetec certified. It allows a novice to get the system up to a pretty good level before handing it over to someone who's really the expert. There's also a backup feature on the maintenance side, and this cloud backup feature is unique to each system. So each system will have a unique backup for that system, and it means in the event of a failure, you're dealing with a 20-minute re-image and then a restore from backup, and that 20-minute re-image restore from backup, probably a half hour in total. It includes configuration data. So you're talking about instead of having to re-provision a system and manually configure Security Center on that system and get it back online, all of that is already going to be done. You're really just doing a 30-minute re-image process with the restore, and you're up and running again. So a lot of time can be saved in maintenance if there ever is a failure. And then again, it's taking a lot of settings which are specifically useful for a security deployment, but are often buried very deep in a Windows menu, and putting them in a single, easy to use pane of management. So, turning on and off remote desktop is more complex than just turning on or off remote desktop. It's also changing the GPOs and everything else associated with remote desktop. So that's done as a single toggle here instead of having to know how to change the GPOs as well as how to change the actual enabling and disabling a remote desktop through Windows menus.
We're not just selling the hardware, we're making sure that the hardware that we sell is going to be supported. And this isn't just a Dell warranty, right? The customer can phone in through the Genetec GTAC system, so your normal support system, single source of support. You get those extended warranties from Dell, but you get the single source of support. So this is really important because from a customer perspective, if something isn't working correctly, it's really down to Genetec or the systems integrator to define whether it's software or it's hardware. From an end user perspective, they don't really care. They're just something isn't working properly. So this single support is single source support is very, very important, right?
Yeah, and it really goes to the value of the relationship we have with Dell and Intel in here, because what we're doing is we're focusing on our areas of expertise. So Dell is an expert at their hardware. They know their hardware extremely well. They don't know the software that's being run on the hardware, and they're not going to help support that software because it's outside of their mandate. But here, you call into Genetec first. We will quickly assess whether or not it's a hardware or software issue. And if it's software, you're already speaking to the Genetec support team. They're going to troubleshoot that. If it's hardware, then we will engage quickly with Dell, and we go in at the OEM support tier. So we jump the queue in certain respects to get a very quick turnaround on support and to get really a very good level of service, whether it be hardware or software. And crucially, if it's ambiguous whether it's a hardware or software issue, then the full ownership of that case lies within Genetec. So There's not going to be any finger pointing. We take pride in not doing that as a whole, even if we're just focusing on the software. We really do want to solve a problem for any customer, regardless of the deployment. But when we've been the one providing the hardware, like with Streamvault, we will really go that extra mile to make sure that whatever the issue, we're gonna track down the root cause and get it fixed.
Yeah, and the support guys from Genetec are already trained, are already local within your local country. So whether it be India, Singapore, Australia, or anywhere else in Asia Pacific, the guys that you're going to be speaking to on the phone have that ability to not only fault find security center in your application, but also triage the initial hardware and then log the Dell support case as and when required. So again, another benefit that we've got fully trained people within Asia Pacific that can support your hardware as well as your software.
Yeah, and that global support is another area where it's important to team up with a tier 1 vendor like Dell, because they have that global footprint. They have spare drives. They have technicians in on site in these different locations. So you call into Genetec support, which is already going to be local, and then we can leverage Dell's global supply network of spare parts and technicians. So moving on to the portfolio, I'll talk through this a little bit. Lee, ask any questions you have as they come up. The first thing, and this is what actually goes back the longest in Genetec's portfolio. So the oldest bit of video appliance hardware that we had at Genetec was called the SV16 and the SV32. The all-in-ones are the successors to that. So this is now the SV100 and the SV300. And the goal here is to combine all the different roles of a security appliance into a single unit. So you've got the security center software, including the directory role, the archiver role, and the client role. So you can plug a monitor and a keyboard in, and you're up and running with this one box. And then when we move into the unification conversation, it's also got software, which is the Synergis software pre-installed in there. So it can work as an access control device as well. You just have to plug it into the same network as your controllers, and you're up and running. So a really good competitive product for run rate projects, and especially unified projects. If you look at it in terms of just a video system and you compare it with other video systems out there, it's price competitive already. But then when you add in the access control, the intrusion management, the intercom, and everything else, it really becomes an enormous value.
And these are great form factors as well, these all-in-ones, aren't they, David?
Yeah, they are. They're nice and small. There's a micro form factor, and you can get it with a VESA mount. It's very adaptable. You can mount it on a wall in a cabinet, or you can put it behind a monitor if you're running in an office situation. It's a very tight, compact unit. Great for individual sites or great for multi-sites using Federation. Moving on to analytics, where we're trying to optimize here is get you as many analytics channels as possible for as little as for the least amount of spend. So we're really optimizing the dollar per analytics channel. We focus specifically on our Kiwi analytics. So we, instead of looking at all third-party analytics, we really wanted to test our analytics right to the limit. So our security analytics, our crowd estimator, our people counter, all of those really intelligent analytics, especially the ones using deep learning and GPU acceleration. That's what these are optimized for, specific units just for the analytics, and they're considered sort of expansion units. So you can add this unit but next to an archiver that's already in place. You don't have to do resizing of the archiver. It's, add on this unit, you can get up to 75 people counting or privacy protector, for example. The next one we have is the workstations. Here, what we want to do is guarantee performance on the decoding and really test the decoding up to its limit to take out any ambiguity of what a workstation can do. But the other thing that's crucial with these workstations is the cybersecurity. This is the unit that on your security network is probably the most vulnerable. It's going to be connected probably to the management, to the user network, as well as the security network. So if you have segregated networks, this is going to be a weak link between the two. It's also probably got users on it, logging in, connecting to it. There was a major pipeline breach not in the Americas this year, where the whole pipeline had to shut down, and it was a result of someone using a workstation that was operating their pipeline, their OT system, and they clicked on a phishing link on that machine, and it took the whole company down for a week. the US East Coast ran out of fuel. So Workstations cybersecurity is extremely important because it touches both the OT and IT network. And that's something that we've addressed here. All those cybersecurity features we talked about before are baked into this workstation as well.
And that's where those USB ports are.
Yeah, exactly. That's the USB ports. There's a lot of those. So we have toggles in the control panel to help you de-harden it a little bit if you need. For example, if your workstation is deployed in a SOC, you can turn off the logout automatically after 10 minutes because you're already in a controlled environment. So we have that de-hardening built into the control panel. But yeah, the hardening of the workstations is super important. That's one of the weakest vectors of attack. And finally, we have the archivers, and those are the modular archivers. So there's, the directory rack mount appliance, or there's the archiver appliances. This is where we're putting a bunch of spindles in there to try and get you the best dollar per terabyte on the market, really drive high density storage opportunities. And again, the archivers, guaranteed performance, both for recording, redirection, and playback, and have all the cybersecurity features we talked about before. When we look at what that actually looks like in the product line, we have the 100 and 300, which are those all-in-one appliances we talked about, the small form factor appliances, which are great for unified projects, either individual or multiple sites with federation. We have the SV2000, which is our mid-market solution. It's Windows Server and PowerEdge based, so it's a very good set of it's a very good bit of hardware with a good operating system on it, and then Security Center software added as well. SV4000 is slightly better. It's using SAS drives instead of SATA drives. They're still the same speed, so 7200 RPM. It's just got that SAS controller in it, which is multi-channel, so it's better if there's a lot of reading and writing going on simultaneously. And it has a little bit more longevity because the SAS controller is more intelligent than the SATA controller. SATA controller, it sees X amount of errors in Y variable of time, and it's going to fail the drive. The SAS drive can look into the SAS controller, can look into the types of failures and say, oh, these failures are all in different sectors, or they're all in different types of failures. So I can not fail this drive. It's got a little bit more intelligence in the algorithm. And finally, we have the 7000. That is a designed solution. It's our large centralized storage. It can either be run as a bare metal or as a virtual option. And it's all built on Dell EMC equipment. So most of it is Isilon. And so the scaling there goes up to 58 petabytes.
So reach out to your Genetec sales engineers if you have any design or scalability questions around especially the 4000 and the 7000 series when we start scaling out with the storage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the 7000 especially is really a design solution. So most of these products can be picked off our catalog, and you can look at the performance numbers on the catalog. But when you get into the 7000, that's where you really want to have Genetec's sales engineering involved, because you'll probably be talking about failover scenarios and a bunch of different things that add complexity to the deployment. Let us do the design for you, and then you'll get the best experience.
So
and that's it.
So all that leaves me to do really is first and foremost, thank you, David, for making the time. Thank you to Dell and Intel for making this all possible. We talked a lot about the close relationship, but really we can't thank Dell and Intel enough for this this triangle relationship that allows us to bring this solution to market. And obviously give our customers and our end users the benefit of the Streamvault, power of Streamvault, really. So thanks again, David, and thank you everybody for joining, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Cheers.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me on, Lee.